Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this contemporary military forum titled Building the Army of 2030, Modernization of Combat Capabilities. I am Trish Sellers, the Director of Business Creation for GM Defense. GM Defense is one of AUSA's star sponsors and is very proud to be part of this professional development forum. For more than 100 years, General Motors has answered the call to support the United States Armed Forces in every major conflict, from producing trucks and tanks, powertrains and ammunition, to refitting our manufacturing facilities to deliver additional combat support materials. GM has supported the nation's modernization efforts time and time again. GM Defense is proud to continue GM's legacy of modernization, enhancing warfighter capability and increasing military mobility on battlefields around the world. We appreciate what the Association of the United States Army has done for the total Army through educating, informing, and connecting, as we see right here at AUSA's annual meeting. Thank you for being part of this program. Now I will turn the floor over to the former Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Army, the Chairman and CEO of the Civilian Marksmanship Program, and one of AUSA's distinguished senior fellows, Mr. Jerry O'Keefe. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see such a full room here, and as I think you all know, we have a number of folks also participating online, streaming this presentation. And it's an important presentation, and we have a fantastic panel here today to talk about modernizing the Army. For those of you that went to the Eisenhower luncheon today, I think you heard the Chief articulate his vision for modernization amongst many other things. And so a couple of admin things here real quick. Many of you will have noticed that you've got a 5x8 card on your seats. Those are for you to ask questions, and especially given the Chief's comments about modernization, you can start filling those out as soon as you're ready, and someone will be by to pick them up. We also have microphones on either side of the room, so as we get into the panel discussion, certainly move over to the microphones and we'll call on you. What I'd like to do is today, in terms of the run of show here, is to talk for about a minute about AUSA and all that your association does for you. Then we'll introduce the panel members. They'll each give a short opening presentation, and then we'll get into the questions and answers. So AUSA, Trish kind of laid out some of the things that AUSA does, but AUSA's mission is to be the voice for the Army and support for the soldier. And when you look at this symposium, an annual meeting, and everything that it entails, you can see both elements of that mission come through loud and clear. The voice for the Army with what the Secretary did yesterday in her opening comments and what the Chief did at lunch, and other Army leaders across the course of the 3 days. And supporting the soldier. Forums like this that are great professional development venues for all of you and for the rest of the Army online, and for our partners in industry, our partners around the world. So it is, AUSA just does so many things. And of course, this is the capstone symposium and annual meeting, but there are many, many other professional development opportunities that AUSA runs across the year. AUSA's other main effort is for advocacy. AUSA can advocate for the Army in ways the Army can't. They do that nationally here with the headquarters of AUSA and General Brown, but that also happens at the local and state level through AUSA's 121 chapters, most of them in the United States, but eight OCONUS. So it is a big enterprise and effort. And with all that, membership matters. So for those of you that are AUSA members, and I suspect that's most of you, thank you for your membership. We very much appreciate it. For those of you that are not members, we would sincerely ask you to think about it. You can visit AUSA's booth. It's booth number 307 here. Or, of course, you can join online. So with those admin remarks out of the way, we'd like to get into the heart of the discussion here. As I said, we've got a great panel. We've got the presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, the Honorable Mr. Doug Bush. So Doug oversees the ALT enterprise for the Army in support of the Secretary of the Army, and so with that comes policy and a lot of other things, but as most of you know, ASALT also has its PEOs and PMs, so Mr. Bush has a direct a direct role in execution for ALT kinds of things in the Army. We were privileged to have two of the Army's 4 ACOM commanders here, General Ed Daly, the Commanding General of Army Materiel Command, and General Jim Rainey, the Commanding General of Army Futures Command. General Daly, of course, has commanded all things logistics. He's commanded AMC now for a few years and was the Deputy Commanding General prior to that, so he has sat over the Army's logistics and sustainment enterprise for many years and has a wealth of knowledge there. General Rainey was commissioned as an infantryman, has commanded at all levels to include 3ID, Sestica, most recently the Combined Arms Command out at Fort Leavenworth, and he has been commanding Army Futures Command for all of a couple of days, I think, or less than a week. So let's give General Rainey a hand for his promotion and assumption of command. To add to the discussion, to add to the richness of the discussion, and to give us different perspectives, we have two of our industry partners here. So we have Mr. Wes Anderson, the Vice President of Defense at Microsoft, and Mr. Wahid Nawabi, the Chairman, President, and CEO of AeroVironment. So gentlemen, welcome to you as well, and we look forward to hearing from your perspectives. So again, I think a lot of important topics for us to discuss here today. For those that you have questions, I would ask that you start filling those out. I'm here to moderate this. I have several questions of my own, but we're going to prioritize yours, and we hope to get to those as quickly as possible. So without further ado, Mr. Bush.
Okay, well, thanks so much for the kind introduction. Really appreciate it. And by the way, just one clarification on admin. Nobody from ASALT is allowed to ask any questions. Just kidding. Not kidding. We can do questions later. So thanks for being here. And so first of all, let me say and thank my fellow panelists, especially my two fine 4-star officers I work with every day. I'm privileged to work with for doing this panel with us. So overall, I just want to say how, broadly speaking, thrilled I am about where Army modernization is today. So we've got a lot of programs underway. The Army on a given day has between 500 and 512 programs, actually. Not all of them get the same, time in the spotlight, but they all matter to the Army. But the big ones, the ones that the chief highlighted, for example, at lunch, the ones the secretary spoke of in her remarks, are broadly speaking all in good shape. There's always risks, but I'm very pleased with the work that's happened. And let me first now take a second to thank the people who made that happen. In the Army, there is a vast, vast array of people that work under us who do the really hard work of developing requirements, developing sustainment plans, working with industry, testing programs. They're civilians and military folks. They are dedicated public servants, and they do amazing work every day. So those folks are why we're in such a good place right now, primarily, their hard work. But also, I should mention industry. So industry, especially during COVID, stayed in the factories, kept producing, kept us on track, stayed in the labs doing the research and development work. So the partnership between the Army and industry is strong, and I really want to work hard to keep it that way. But really, those folks are why we're doing well today. So one level above that, though, why are we doing so well, in my opinion, and just a few things to offer as thoughts. The first one is consistency of priority and priority of support from Army senior leaders across 2 administrations. It makes a huge difference. It keeps the Army on track and moving in the same direction, and that's been a huge factor. A second factor that's been a big deal is we have flexible requirements that are very well thought through, technically achievable, informed by experimentation and informed by real threats. So that has enabled us in acquisition, my part of the broader effort, to work with the requirements community in an iterative basis, back and forth. Nothing gets thrown over the fence. Everything's an ongoing conversation. And having observed the Army for many years from outside, the Army has been challenged with getting requirements right to make acquisition success possible. I think we've got a great system in place right now. General Murray laid a great foundation at Futures Command that's underlying that, and I think that's a second critical thing, which is why we're doing well right now. So a third thing I'd mention is flexibilities from Congress. So Congress passes a lot of laws every year. They pass a big defense bill every year, but buried in that, back in the 2016-2017 period, was three flexibilities that we are making use of now that we wouldn't be where we are now without them. So that's being able to rapid prototype, so start programs in a rapid prototyping environment, rapid fielding, which hopefully follows after a successful prototyping effort, and one that doesn't get talked about as much, but it's going to be a bigger deal over coming years, is the software modernization pathway, which is its own special software acquisition path specific to software and doing software better, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in the future. So those factors all coming together, along with the great work across the Army, are why I think we're doing so well with this round of modernization. That said, there are risks in all programs. We've got programs that are trying to do very technically challenging things, so we will hit bumps along the road. The issue is, how does the Army deal with them? And so far, I've seen great work when we've run into those of getting through them. So 2022 was a big year. So we got mobile protected firepower to Milestone C, next generation squad weapon from rapid prototyping, and we're going into rapid fielding. A large range of other programs, so also including some important logistics modernization programs we're working on, and intelligence modernization. So two other areas of focus for the Secretary and the Chief. So 2022 has been exciting. 2023 will be even bigger. So in particular, 3 long-range fires programs that will make a huge increase in the Army's long-range capability, and that's long-range hypersonic weapon, mid-range capability batteries, and the PRISM long-range missile. Those 3 will make a dramatic sea change, really, in the Army's ability to hit precision at range. Coming along with that are 2 big other hardware programs. So obviously the FLRAA programs, we're working towards selecting the winner of that competition, and then we'll go into development. And also the Optionally Manned Fighting Vehicle, where we will down select next year to 3 companies that will build prototypes. So a Bradley replacement, long sought after, is getting close to the critical, important next step. So a lot going on next year. There's more I could list, but that's a big list. And all of that, I do want to add one other factor, and that's the importance of teamwork. So the Army, and it's, I was in the Army long ago. The Army's culture and values don't change that dramatically. The Army, a core value of the Army is putting yourself behind the greater good. Working together as a team to accomplish something more important than your goals. That happens all the way up at the top, I can assure you, and it's absolutely essential. No one in the Army is an island. We in acquisition have an important job to do. We can develop technologies and work to create new capabilities for the Army, but that's not enough to produce real capability in the field. It's not just the platforms. Everything else is really just as important. So what General Daly does, for example, at at AMC is absolutely vital and essential to having real capability in the field that matters. Other countries have, for example, a lot of equipment and not a lot of ammunition or the ability to sustain it in combat. The American Army has that, and it's a tremendous amount of work that has to happen, and General Daly leads those efforts. And then General Randy Army's Futures Command. Here in ASALT, we develop systems, but we don't decide what they're going to be. That has to come from the military leadership and thought about what the future holds, what do we need, and what does the equipment need to do. That, informed by science and technology work that AFC does and experimentation, all has to flow into our programs being successful. So you need the whole team to work together, and right now, I believe it is. But that's the only way to get anything done in the Army, is to have teammates and work together, and I'm certainly committed to that. My teammates up here on the stage are. So I just wanted to add that as a final thought, that everything in the Army requires that, and that's the message to my team, and I think that's what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, come on, that was weak. It's right after lunch. Come on. Good afternoon, everybody. Come on now. There you go. Hey, first, I want to thank Mr. O'Keefe for really facilitating this venue today. One, for your service to our nation and what you continue to do for our Army. So how about a round of applause for Mr. O'Keefe? Two Army senior leaders in the audience here today. I want to recognize General Maddox and General Perkins for their tremendous leadership, many decades of service, and what they continue to do for our great force. It's really interesting because not only are they two great mentors and supporters, but for General Perkins, he had 4 brigade commanders when he was a division commander, and I will tell you, we're all here because of his leadership. One was Jim Rainey, the second was myself, the third was Randy George, and the fourth was John Koloszewski. So, sir, thanks for your influence and investment in us. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're standing on your shoulders. So how about a round of applause for these great gentlemen? I see all of our partners and allies out there, and I'd ask you to stand so we can recognize you and thank you for what you do in collaboration and support each and every day. So you can stand up so we can give you a hand. Great. Come on. Awesome. And as I look around, as Honorable Bush was speaking, and, you can see many industry partners out there, and this really starts to get at this whole concept of collaboration, coordination, unity of effort, and partnership. Without you, from a defense industrial base perspective, and so how about a round of applause for our industry partners? So just to circle back, Doug mentioned several great points, and I'll pull a thread on those here in a couple of minutes, but the Secretary and the Chief have been clear in terms of their vision, their priorities. They talked about the purpose of the Army being able to fight and win our nation's wars, period. Talked about 24 systems in 23. Talked about this being the largest transformation the Army is undergoing in the last 40 years. So as that is the backdrop, I think it's very, very clear in terms of where we need to go with 2 real horizons and timelines associated with it. One is building the Army of 2030, which we'll focus our efforts on today, and the second is really designing the Army of 2040, which is squarely in Jim's lane, as well as several other stakeholders. And so I wanted to start with just echoing what Honorable Bush mentioned in terms of this collaboration, the collaboration between AMC from an AMC perspective with ASALT, with TRADOC and Army Futures Command. Jim is charted with designing the Army of 24, really defining the operational concept, looking at gaps, looking at next generation technologies and capabilities, and really getting that 2040 organizational structure that's ready to fight and win. And our partnership with TRADOC in terms of between now and 2030, how do we set the conditions across the DOTLM-PF framework? And then you look at echelon. I'll talk about that here in a second. But we couldn't do it if this wasn't a team effort, and again, partnered with you from an industry perspective. So you see on my slide, it's the first of 42 slides I have today. No, I'm just kidding. There's just 17. But 4 lines of effort, I think, that are important. I'll touch on each of these, and if you want to go into more detail in the questions and answers, I'd be glad to. But the first is Oib Modernization and Performance. I think what you've seen over the last 6 to 8 months is coming to the forefront is the importance of not only the organic industrial base, but more broadly the defense industrial base in terms of its performance, but its requirements to modernize and increase capacity. And then the vulnerabilities and how we mitigate vulnerabilities of the supply chain so they don't affect our ability to support combat operations. And we're seeing that, and it's one of our big lessons learned. And so what are we doing? Well, we're working, partnering with ASALT, not only from a go-go and go-co perspective, but really how do we look at supply chain vulnerabilities, increasing capacity. And so you look at depot arsenals and ammunition plants like Watervliet, Radford, Holston, Iowa, Scranton, Anniston, all had to surge capacity and is surging capacity based on their capabilities to meet future demand signal. And so within that construct, as Doug and I have had to testify to the Hill on how do we modernize the organic industrial base, and then based on the clear and present danger and the acute threat and obviously what's going on in the Ukraine, how do we accelerate that? How do we accelerate it from a standpoint of increased capacity? How do we accelerate it from a standpoint of robotic sensors in terms of bringing our manufacturing and production lines into the 21st century? How do we retrain our workforce? How do we attack vulnerabilities and single points of failure? Not just in terms of the product we make, but even as far as raw materials and chemical precursors. So that's what we're looking at as we progress for the future, and I'd be glad to talk more about that. The second line of effort you see there is signature modernization programs, and Honorable Bush talked a lot about those, and we're leaning in from an AMC perspective. But I think the real power here is the next level of echelon and partnership, the partnership with the TRADOC Centers of Excellence, with the Army Futures Command cross-functional teams. I think it's important from a standpoint of the ASALT PEOs and then the life cycle management commands within Army Material Command to really bring this to life. And really based on what Doug talked about in terms of prototyping and really getting ahead in terms of technical maturation and testing and obviously engineering and manufacturing development early, left of milestone C. What are the things that we can do? Because as you know, the narrative used to be that 80% of the life cycle cost of a platform was related to sustainment. Well, now based on what we're doing and getting left of this early, whether it's in the ACDDs, the abbreviated requirements documents, or somewhere prior to milestone 3, I think it's really, really important that we look at the things we've done to really integrate that effort. And so between FAR and FLARA, OMFV, et cetera, we've done a bunch of things, I think, that are groundbreaking to drive those costs down. The projections now is that we could be somewhere between 50 and 60% as opposed to 80%. Huge game changer, because then we can apply those dollars to other locations. And I think as we look at it and we go forward, what have we done? Well, digital design, modular open system architecture, predictive analytics and prognostics, really getting deep into the specifics of the tech data we purchase, then we translate to CAD drawings, et cetera. So a myriad of things that we're looking at. How do we reduce demand? How do we increase reliability and maintainability, et cetera? So a bunch of things are working, and I'd just like to identify the life cycle management commands within AMC, because you're the ones who are partnering with the rest of the Army. And so I want to start with the TACOM team. So the TACOM team, can you stand? That's Darren Werner and his great Sergeant Major. So that's the TACOM team. How about a round of applause for the TACOM team? Okay. Colonel Maddox, part of the JMC Command Team. So the JMC Command Team stand, Joint Munitions Command. The mighty AMCOM team, led by Tom O'Connor and his great Sergeant Major. And I'm going to risk and ask if the CCOM team is here. Are they here somewhere? There they are in the back there. Okay, the CCOM team. So again, I think it's very, very important as we go forward to make sure people understand we're focused on these signature systems, but it's just one of our lines of effort. And then the last one, and then I'll pass the mic to Jim Rainey. But we have to look at how we change, adjust, and bring our sustainment warfighting function capabilities into the 21st century. And we have to look comprehensively from tactical edge all the way to factory fort and foxhole. So whether it's power projection in the continental United States, to the depots, arsenals, and ammunition plants, through the external lines of communication and strategic movement, projecting force, moving materiel, all the way to the operational and tactical edge. And I think that's huge in terms of how we go about that. So at the tactical and operational edge, we're partnering with Jim Rainey, and we'll talk more about that if you want, in terms of what those 21st century potential capabilities are, because there are several, and I think they're game-changing, and then how we're partnering with ASALT from a standpoint, the operational or strategic approach from the OIB perspective, as we talked about. And then the last piece I won't talk about, but it really has to do with all the other things we're doing to get at this 2030 Army. Army pre-positioned stocks, foreign military sales, which is a huge, huge enabler, as you know, that has allowed us to do what we're doing in the Ukraine as an example. And then power projection investments, and then protecting our external lines of communication, strategic lift, et cetera. All that's part of how we build the Army for 2030, sustain the Army for 2030, and then look out to 2040. So thanks for listening to me. I know I went a little bit over in time, but I look forward to your questions and answers. Thanks, Jim.
All right, I'll get us back on time. But no, thank you. First, thanks to AUSA. You all right? I'm good. Okay. Checking on you. Thanks to AUSA for hosting us.
Non-logistician I know about.
Yep, gave me a medal for it. Mr. Bush, thank you very much, not just for including me on the panel, but the teamwork, your leadership, helping with my transformation, the time we spent working together for the same purpose when I was a G3. So I'm honored, and I hope you don't regret your decision here in a few minutes. Just kidding. And General Daly, I won't recognize the same folks that General Daly did, but know that I am as appreciative of everybody, partners, allies, teammates, mentors. Get good General Perkins stories if anybody wants later on to talk about that. But not enough time. Correction, I've been the AFC commander all week. So, but hey, I'm joking around about that, but there's no earned run average in command in the Army. You don't get to blame the runners on base on the last guy. I'm the commander. I'm accountable. I got it. So got a lot of learning, bunch of great teammates to do it with, but we're doing important work. And I'm excited about the opportunities that lay ahead for everybody to get everything done, just like the chief and the secretary said. It's about supporting the Constitution. It's about the men and women who join, all volunteer force to fight. And our part of that is an honor and a privilege. Again, important work to do with great teammates, who can't get excited about that, right? So I'm with you. To me, what we're talking about really is transformation, right? Their secretary said to transform the Army on a strategic, sustainable path. And all three of those words matter. Strategic. We have a national defense strategy, right? Brand new one. Strategic. We have a national military strategy. Our secretary has issued strategic guidance, and our chief has given us guidance. It's about fighting and winning our nation's wars at the end. So we got good strategic guidance, sustainable, acknowledging I'm in a room full of sustainers here, but that's a lot to unpack that. It's fiscally sustainable. We got to be clear-eyed about what we decide to do, that we're actually going to be able to do that with the resources we're provided while we maintain current readiness, while we prioritize our people. That's our real strength and our most valuable and lethal weapon system we have. It's about contested logistics. You got to sustain. You think about a high-end fight against a near peer, especially in the theaters, we're going to do that. There's a lot to sustaining that. And that'd be a great questions for General Daly later when we get to question and answer. But it's also about putting ammo, gas, parts, and getting wounded soldiers out of rifle squads and tank platoons at the very edge of a very lethal, complex, and dangerous battlefield. So strategic, sustainable, and maybe my favorite word in there is a path. And I said it the other day, I think it was Sinclair Lewis, but if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And we have a level of clarity. If we're self-critical, we've been better at other times than, better sometimes than others. But when we were really good at transformation, the real successful ones, it was when we had an understanding, not a perfect plan, but we had an understanding of where we were going, 70, 80, 90% solution of where we want to be in 2030, and can adjust that. You know, we're going to continue to learn and adjust that. But the power of that lets you make better, clear-eyed decisions, lets you manage risk. And so the path part may be the most important part of that. AFC is on the team. We got a big part to play in this, just like everybody does. I totally support and agree with everything Mr. Bush and General Daly said. You know, AFC's piece of this is to deliver Army 2030 and design 2040 across full DOPML PFP. That's it. That's all we got to do. But seriously, it takes everybody, takes partners and allies. We're not going to fight alone. We're not, you know, there is no maritime or air theater. There's only joint theaters. And anybody who's been in combat would never dream of fighting any way other than as a joint force, things like that. So deliver Army 2030 while we design 2040. So I'm again very appreciative of being included in this, very optimistic and excited about the opportunity, very confident about the ability for everybody to work together and put our men and women in the Constitution of the United States first and foremost. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's see. On track, off track, on track again. Is it my turn to get us off track? No pressure, Wes. You just have to get us back on track again. No, I'll try to stay on track as well. First and foremost, thank you for allowing us, Mr. Bush and generals, to be part of this. It's a privilege and an honor. I really was pinching myself as to how could I be in the presence of such incredible leaders and honored individuals. I do want to also, besides all the other thank yous, is thank all of our service men and women in uniform and off uniform. I'm actually one of the beneficiary of your sacrifices. I was born and raised in Afghanistan. You can see from my name, it's not a very common name. And so the rights and the freedoms that we enjoy in this country, I'm a direct beneficiary of that. So thank you for your service. And I could not agree with you more, the sacrifices that all of you make to help us enjoy the freedoms and the privileges that we have in this country. A little bit about AeroVironment, because they asked us to provide some. And our mission is very straightforward, actually, to secure lives and advance sustainability through transformative innovation. So I think that is very, very consistent with the theme of this session. We've been around for 50 years. You probably have known products such as the Ravens and the Pumas and Switchblade and the Mars helicopter and the solar stratospheric airplane that flies for months at a time with no other energy except solar. That's what we do. Everything we do is unmanned systems, from UAVs and ground robots, and we've been committed to this industry for 53 years actually this year. And U.S. Army is our largest customer ever. We've been around in business for the last decade that I've been with the company. And innovation by far is our #1 competitive differentiator. We lead by innovation, which is very consistent with the theme of this session. With agility, we want to be very nimble and flexible, as Mr. Bush said. And the last one for us is customer intimacy, being very close to the warfighters and the leaders that design those CONOPS and missions and capabilities to make sure we deliver that capability to the soldier and our warfighters, so they have what we refer to as an advantage against our adversaries. So thank you again, and I appreciate everything that you guys do and look forward to the discussion and questions.
I want to thank the Honorable Doug Bush, General Daly, General Rainey, Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Nawabi. It's a privilege to be part of this distinguished panel here today. And I'll let you in on a little-known fact. Today's my birthday. So I want to thank everyone for coming out, celebrating with me. It's officially like my largest birthday celebration ever. But I know that's not why you're here. And some of you may be asking, why is Microsoft here? And I've been at Microsoft for 25 years. During that time, I can absolutely tell you that we've been committed to the Department of Defense, to serving the men and women of the DoD, serving the mission, and that's encompassed many of our products, from productivity to hyperscale cloud. We've got advanced networking, ruggedized devices, but we know a lot is needed going forward, and that's the part that I wanted to talk about here today. So looking to the future, we've heard from warfighters loud and clear that future adversaries are heavily invested in emerging technology, and we need to do the same and more. That will help them retain a decisive battlefield advantage. And the statistics aren't pretty. In 1960, 36% of global R&D spend was U.S. federal defense related, compared to 31% foreign. Fast forward to today, despite helpful increases in the past two DoD budgets, only 4% of global R&D stems from federal defense investments, compared to 70% of the worldwide spend coming from foreign countries, and not all of them are friendlies. We need to do more. That's why the DoD has to harness the power of the intense amount of commercial innovation coming from private sector. At Microsoft, we're approaching this imperative with $25 billion of our own R&D investments. We spent the last 2 decades building a quantum computer with topological qubits that maximizes for reliability, for speed, for size. We're working with partners to supply 5G across DoD installations around the world. We are committed to sharing our best technology with the Department of Defense and investing in future needs, because victory in 2030 will require supremacy in AI, machine learning, and beyond. We know a lot of progress is needed, but I felt it was important to recognize the strides the Army has made in digital transformation. The work that Dr. Raj Iyer, the Army CIO, is doing is truly accelerating the Army's digital capabilities, bringing the best of commercial innovation and cloud computing and collaboration tools, and being creative, enabling soldier success. Some examples where we're working to deliver our most advanced capabilities: being part of the team of teams that has helped bring the cloud to the operational Army. The partnership with DAG6, First Corps, PEO C3T, Paul Puckett at ECMA, and industry partners has demonstrated the ability of soldiers to leverage the cloud and cloud-native solutions to solve war-fighting problems. Microsoft is proud to be part of that team. We recently partnered with the Army Corps of Engineers to leverage supercomputing in the cloud. Why is that important? This project is using our hyperscale cloud capabilities and our planetary computer to help the Corps of Engineers improve extreme weather modeling for coastal communities, to help them understand how these communities can build and prepare for future extreme weather events. With climate change, we know how important this type of research is, especially as these events introduce greater national security risk. But challenges remain. From an industry perspective, we need more help breaking down barriers to rapid acquisition and adapting security processes to enable versus delay the adoption of new technology that brings new mission capabilities. Employing vehicles like OTAs has enabled a company like ours, a non-traditional defense partner, to come in and make the investments necessary to help develop innovative products and solutions tailored to the needs of the DoD. OTAs are a tool that can bring in other non-traditional partners, even smaller companies with impressive tech, to work with the Army and other branches across emerging technologies. The challenge is there are still barriers to employing acquisition approaches like this more broadly that can create friction and slow progress. Another area that is vital is shortening the distance between people with requirements and requirements generators. Also, getting feedback from soldiers into acquisition processes as quickly as possible. That means incorporating more flexibility in the contracting process as requirements change or needs change. All of this will help accelerate and advance the partnerships that industry can have with the Army over the long term. I want to wrap with sharing a few ways I believe accelerating innovation is key to the future. As Secretary Wormuth recently highlighted, a number of key modernization priorities include being able to see the battlefield at all times, improved coordination of assets, being able to communicate and share data rapidly. A lot of this will require a robust data and digital infrastructure. Working with and coordinating across joint forces and coalition partners will require interoperable technologies, so you aren't wasting time downloading, processing, converting data to order to make decisions. That should be seamless. That's the goal for the DoD's Enterprise Cloud and the upcoming Joint Warfighting Cloud capability, which links to the broader Joint All-Domain Command and Control initiative. The Army and the DoD see cloud as the platform for the future. Cloud will bring ever-advanced AI and machine learning capabilities that will improve automation of core processes, data analysis, enabling information dominance, and giving a decision advantage. One of the questions that we get at Microsoft, we've made a lot of investments in non-traditional areas. How can we put that to work for the DoD? An area where we see that is in GEMS. So we take the years of gaming experience that we developed and we bring it into gaming exercises, modeling, and simulation. As we look to the future, we want to continue to partner with Army leadership to advance further into emerging areas like space, quantum, and cyber. All critical areas necessary to improve U.S. defense posture. The bottom line is that industry is here, Microsoft is here to enable Army success. And I want to thank the men and women of the U.S. Army, like Mr. Nwabi here. We know that you enable the freedoms that we get to enjoy as a country, and we are grateful for all that you do. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. So great comments, and I think for the audience, certainly an opportunity to key off of some of those comments and ask some questions, and I think we have some of those getting teed up. So what I gleaned from this was the partnership that exists here with the internal Army players, the Army commands, headquarters Department of the Army, all working together, and not just in the government, but with our key industry partners to make what is a very complex system of acquisition work. And I can tell you, having spent 41 years in uniform or in a suit in the Pentagon, that isn't always the case. And so we've got a great team here that's partnering. And I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question, and then hopefully we'll get to all of you. And again, we do have some microphones out there in the audience, so if we have a brave person out there to ask a question, that would be great. And if not, I know General Perkins will ask a couple of questions of his former brigade commanders. So obviously we're all watching what's been going on in the Ukraine with the war between Ukraine and Russia. It's been ongoing now for over 7 months. We're seeing, I'm sure, lots of lessons learned across all of the things that are happening there with long-range fires, with UAVs, with sustainment, with ground combat and armored systems, the whole plethora of things. And this is while we are going through this process of modernizing the Army in 2030. We're starting to field systems this year and in past years, but 24 this year. So given that this is an unclassified environment and there's probably a lot of things we can't talk about, I would like to ask each of the panel members, how are we integrating, maybe from a broad general perspective, what we are learning from what's happening in the Ukraine and ensuring that we're spiraling those lessons learned into our acquisition programs? And Mr. Bush, if you wouldn't mind starting out, sir.
Very briefly, and I'd leave the military analysis to General Daly and General Rainey, but I can talk from a acquisition standpoint briefly. So one thing that's been a big deal with our Ukraine response is our working with industry to dramatically and quickly move to higher rates of production for systems to replace what we've sent to support our allies in Ukraine. So that's been ongoing work. It's basically everyday work. But industry has been very responsive. Congress has been enormously supportive, and we couldn't do it without that support. But overall, that's going well, but it does take time. So industrial mobilization, even with unlimited resources, there is a time aspect to that. A key lesson that I have learned personally watching that is, and General Daly can dive into it more, but this circumstance is why we have organic industrial base. This is exactly it. We have to have, in this case, government-owned capabilities for crisis to fill in the short-term needs before our amazing commercial defense industry can come roaring along behind and then get us up to the levels we need. And again, speaking of thanking people, the workforce at the organic industrial base, in particular, folks doing artillery ammunition, it's amazing work, and we are lucky to have them and have those facilities. So that's point one. The second one is a little more down in the weeds, but actually has to do with contracting. So not always the most exciting thing, sorry to the contracting officers in the room, but vitally important and absolutely essential. And General Daly's got Army Contracting Command under his purview, and we work, of course, very closely together on this. But that contracting community, I just want to say, they don't get a lot of credit, but they have responded just tremendously to go much faster than we normally go to get things done for Ukraine. So I want to thank those folks, and then we're doing some more things to try to help them go even faster. And I mentioned that last thing because it shows that we've got the people, we've got the systems and the authorities for when a true crisis comes, the government and the Army can respond and protect the nation. The last thing I mentioned there is that we are using a lot of lessons learned from our COVID response. So a lot of people don't know that it was Army acquisition and contracting professionals who have done all the work to actually procure, distribute the vaccines, therapeutics, supplies, everything the nation needed and demanded to get through the COVID pandemic was your Army. And really proud of those folks. They saved thousands, maybe millions of lives with their work. But your Army did that. And those lessons are what we're trying to apply to Ukraine. So from an acquisition standpoint, I think those are the two big things I'm seeing.
Thank you, sir. A couple things. We got to be careful about saying we've learned something yet. There's a process, but there are, in fact, some very interesting observations with what's going on in Ukraine. And really, going back to 2014, and where the Army very did an excellent job of getting a team in there, produced the Russian Next Generation Warfare Study, and have been pretty much paying attention to that, as well as all the conflicts going around in the world. TRADOC's ability to run a lessons learned operation and translate observations into lessons that end up in PME and in informing requirement documents is actually one of our strengths. And we also need to be very careful of confirmation bias, where we are doing something and we look at what's going on in Ukraine and say, yeah, see, I was right. Because there's some things we are affirming, but there are some things that are very new and interesting. And some of them are affirming some really problematic things. But I will start, it's AUSA, and I'm an Army officer. One observation is land still matters, right? Land matters. War is a contest of wills between human beings, and they continue to insist on living on the land. So land's going to matter. Again, not parochial, joint fight, coalition fight, partner fight. There's clearly going to be a big part of what we do that stays on the land. Most important lesson, I think, again, I'll get to some modernization stuff in a minute, but it's people, right? Human beings. It is very clear that the person that has the soldiers, most importantly, that have the skill and the will to fight, is going to win a tough, nasty fight. The difference between not having versus having a professional non-commissioned officer corps, again, our superpower in the Army, people, and especially what we have with our non-commissioned officer corps. And it looks like the Russians built a formation and tried to push combined armed maneuver down to a battalion level and didn't have the quality and capacity in their commanders to fight combined arms at battalion level, which is the opposite of what we think we should be doing in the Army. So that's good. But there's some alarming things. We got to get our heads around fighting under continuous observation. Everything I learned as an officer coming up started with, traveling Overwatch, bounding Overwatch, how to use the terrain, the importance of IV lines, where a probable line of contact is going to be. You can pretty much skip that part of basic training because now we got to figure out how to fight. And hopefully we'll be able to, I don't think it's going to be all-seeing continuous because we have abilities to take that capability. We're not going to cede that to our enemies, but it's going to be almost without exception, you're going to have to figure out how to fight when the enemy can see you. And you're not going to be able to pile up things. You're not going to be able to build talks. If I was a younger officer, or if I was training anybody below probably brigade level, they need to figure out how to fight out of turrets and underneath ponchos and out of rucksacks. So how are we going to take all the high-tech stuff that we know we need and deliver it in a way that doesn't require you to stop, hold still, or pile up more than a couple vehicles? And I did start as an infantryman. One of the first things I learned is if you don't know which enemy vehicle to shoot, because we did vehicle recognition, which was never my strength, they said, what? Shoot the thing that looks different, right? Right? Good infantry lieutenants learn from a good platoon sergeant, hey, sir, I know it's nice to have that great young soldier carrying your ruck, but you're the only thing in this platoon that looks like one guy with another guy with the radio next to him, right? So we got to, and I'm being a little bit, anyways, I'm serious. We got to figure out how we're going to survive on a battlefield against everything. How much of what happened to the Russians was because of the threat of missiles, ground-launched missiles, and how much of that would our ability to actually do combined arms maneuver prevent that? I mean, how big a problem is that? Somebody could look and go, oh man, Javelin's killing tanks. I personally don't think that would happen to a good U.S. Army formation, but it's something we ought to figure out and pay attention to and continue to emphasize in our training. So fighting under constant observation, and because of 20 years of tough combat where I'll give you another example, I'll shut up. We have a lot of protection against bottom-up stuff, and it comes with a lot of weight. And unless we figure out how to flip some of this stuff over, right, we might find ourselves in a situation where there's not as much of a bottom-up threat, but there is very clearly a top-down threat, 360-degree threat. So that's something I think we ought to put some of our time and energy into that. But again, skill and will of the individual soldier, non-commissioned officer corps, commanders that are the best in the world, the training that underpins that as we go after, and it gets back to my sustainable strategic path, or the Secretary's guidance really, is staying ready every day because the world's a dangerous place, continuing to prioritize our soldiers, civilians, right? And then making hard, risk-informed decisions in a way that get us ready to fight and win on any battlefield we end up on.
Yeah, I would just, I'll stay away from what Honorable Bush mentioned because he's already talked about it and what Jim just talked about. I think some observations that I think inform the future for us at this point that, in some ways may transition to lessons learned. First is the criticality and the foundational requirement to set the theater. And when I say set the theater, it's on several levels from a logistics perspective, a sustainment warfighting function perspective. The first is Army pre-position stocks, unit sets, and commodities, strategic depth of classes applies, specifically Class 5. And we talk Army pre-position stocks, we're really talking about making sure that it's modern, it's positioned correctly, It's ready to go, and it's postured for immediate issue that ensures that we maintain the advantage and the initiative, and it's fast. It's not late to response. The second thing is, I think we're finding that foreign military sales are hugely powerful and enabling to a theater and a numerous countries, partners and allies, and we're seeing that. The third piece, I think, is that to expand on what Jim mentioned, is that this, in terms of being seen and surveillance, I think we have to really take away that not only at the tactical and operational level, but at the strategic level, we're going to be contested from a logistics perspective, from our power projection platforms and from our organic industrial base sites, all the way to the tactical edge. And I think now that informs, one, that we got to be careful that we don't myopically focus on the Ukraine, but have to think bigger in terms of not just crisis in a country, but more of conflict as part of a joint force. And that, I think, allows us to kind of salute a cue to how do we set the Pacific in the future. And I think that's going to be critical. And I think at the operational tactical level, there's, again, several things we need to do in terms of building 21st century sustainment warfighting capabilities and formations that can really not only set the theater and enable the theater, but enable operational reach, prolong endurance, and ensure freedom of action for a COCOM commander and for an Army Service Component Command. So.
Great, thank you. We'd certainly like to get our perspective from our industry partners, so please.
Sure. So obviously the most important feedback is from our military generals, as that Mr. Bush mentioned, but as an industry player who has had a very strong engagement and involvement in Ukraine specifically, and also in the conflicts of Middle East and Afghanistan, there's obviously a lot of lessons learned, probably thousands of lessons learned, and to General Rainey's point, lessons to be learned, observations today that could turn into lessons learned in the future still. So there's a lot more to be assessed. There's a few things that stand out in my mind that it's relevant to us that I can share with you. Number one, if you ask me, is the role that distributed architecture of ISR and loitering munitions are playing or have played in this recent several conflicts. Armenia, Azerbaijan was one, but Ukraine is really the biggest one. I think that is a huge lesson learned, at least for us and for our military as well. The kind of damage that a small system like that can, and really affordable system like that can provide, similar to the things as Javelin, the HIMARS, is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And that's one of the reasons why in the last few years, even though we were faced with COVID, as Mr. Bush mentioned, we did not slow down investments in R&D. We actually accelerated, and we invested more in R&D in the last several years. And I'm very proud of the fact that we and our investor base, we're a public company, so I can say this in a proud way, they support our company to be able to invest 11, 12% of our revenue on R&D, IRAD, not CRAD. And I truly believe that the future of what Wes mentioned earlier, in terms of the amount of dollars that is invested in research and development, it has to be not shouldered all by the US DoD. It can't be. And we have to help in that regard. And that happens with us working with the military leaders and organization, our allies as well as US, to make sure that we spend those dollars in the right places that they need help with and they see capability gaps. And so that's exactly what we're doing. There's several programs and initiatives within the US Army that I'm really excited about, that we are engaged in, and some that are beyond our scope, that is exciting for the future of the US Army and modernization effort. I really believe that, firmly believe that. And another thing, if you ask me another lesson learned key, and I just mentioned a couple that comes to mind, and be also respectful of time, is if you don't have systems that operate in contested battle space or an environment that is heavily contested, you're going to be irrelevant. And I got to give our team and our military a lot of credit that we've been incredibly successful as an organization. A great example of that is in Ukraine with us. They're using a lot of our drones for ISR purposes, primarily the Pumas, and they're asking for more, and which they're going to be getting, of course, based with the support from the U.S. Army. That we learned something about the tactics that the Russians are using in terms of their contested battle space. We learned it from first-hand operators within Ukraine, and we took all that and took it to our engineering team, whose leader is actually in this audience. And within a matter of 3 weeks, we developed a fix and a capability to counteract that. And we delivered that to the field with the support of U.S. military and State Department, all done properly, to the Ukrainians to actually get their systems, give them an advantage. That literally happened in a matter of a 1.5 month window from start to finish. So this ability to be able to innovate and deliver capability in an agile way that Mr. Bush mentioned earlier is going to be key. Absolutely phenomenally important for the future. Most of our adversaries can't really do that well. I think that's an advantage that we have as a country, as a military, and as our allies too. And then, of course, last comment I make, the last point, the third one I would make is how we have organized ourselves with our allies around the world. And we're kind of fortunate because we provide a vast majority of drones to our allies. 50+ countries around the world use similar systems that the U.S. military uses, and we provide those to them. And so having these systems to be interoperable and work as a team, that the training procedures, the maintenance, the sustainability, all are very consistent across the board, across the world with our allies is huge. I think it's scalable, it's sustainable, and it provides a lot of advantage to our forces. Because as a larger force, we're far more capable than that as an individual country or service. I'll stop there, but those are the top 3 that comes to mind specifically about the Ukraine conflict as it stands today. But I believe that there's lots of lessons learned. I do want to make one suggestion. Mr. Bush knows I'm not shy about making suggestions. So I think it would be really great, I just thought about this, that maybe it'd be great for our military to consider assembling a team that what they do is collect all these observations. And I know that the Army has its own and we have our own, but what if we collected all this and sort of compiled it into some key succinct lessons learned? Might be a wild, stupid idea, I'm not sure, but we'll see. So that's a suggestion I want to make. Anyway.